industries, the national security community is going through quite a transformation to try to keep up with adversaries, to reduce costs, and do all the same things that most people are doing except that adversary part. And, when you think about the folks that are putting their fingerprints on that direction or have put those fingerprints in that direction, we should all feel pretty grateful to have some of the key players here today. I'm going to do some introductions and we'll go through some questions and hopefully you all enjoy yourselves. I'm going to start with Colonel Matt Benini, this gentleman to my left here. When you think about if you're trying to use AI and bring in technical knowledge to confront a challenge, we often welcome the value of having this deep functional expertise and domain knowledge coupled with this technical expertise. So Matt is one of those unique individuals that was a company commander in Solder City in one of our more recent conflicts, but he also has a PhD from Carnegie Mellon and is a data scientist practitioner at heart. He was the JSOC Chief Data Scientist, that's Joint Special Operations Command. And in his current role at AFC, he's the Chief Data and Analytics Officer. He is known throughout the community as someone who solves really practical problems quickly that are valuable to users. And I'm not meant to speak for you, David, but I think he's pretty well respected by a lot of the senior leaders trying to drive this digital transformation change. Next, I'm going to introduce Jared Summers. For those of you who didn't see him on the agenda, it's because we took advantage of an opportunity. We're going to talk to you a lot today about this idea of Convergence and JADC2 and how we're going to solve this all sensors on one network problem. And there's this organization called the 18th Airborne Corps that's kind of running point on that and a lot of exercises to figure a lot of that stuff out. Well, they have a chief technology officer, and we're grateful to have you here today, Jared. Jared also has a background with titles like CDO and CTO of some small organizations like ExxonMobil. So he's one of those unique individuals that can kind of bridge that gap, right? For where are you on the commercial side? What is or isn't relevant to what we're trying to do in the national security space? And we feel really lucky to have you here. When I assess that background, Jared, I won't lie to you, I go back and forth. You're either a true public servant or you just don't like money. But thanks for being here today. And certainly, last but not least, we have Mr. David Spurk. David is a former Marine, served most recently as the Chief Data Officer of the Department of Defense. He has significant experience in the intelligence community and has played a critical role in helping the broader DoD move the ball forward on their broader digital modernization strategy. Previously, he was the Chief Data Officer of U.S. Special Forces Command. Prior to that, he was Associate Director of Technology Investment and the Secretary of the Air Force's Office of Concept Development and Management for Advanced Analytics and Technology Investment. This is an individual who is deeply respected and has really done a lot for the department in these efforts around data modernization and AI as it relates to getting super focused on the warfighter and shifting our investments and priorities there. So David, thank you for being here today. We're really grateful to have you. I'm going to kick it off and just kind of get us in. I figure probably 60 or so % of you folks have heard of the word convergence and JADC2 and those types of terms. That's the phone. They warned me. And so I thought the first question will just level set everyone. And so this is for all of you, but I'm gonna start with you, okay, Jared? Project Convergence, data readiness, speed to insight. What does this mean for the military? Have you, as you've gone through Scarlet Dragon and these various exercises, what have you learned? What's working? What's not? And kind of level set the crowd on where we're trying to go.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to be up here, sitting next to these gentlemen, truly giants, across the department and what they've been able to do. To answer the question, what it really means for us is, as we looked at what the mission for the 18th Airborne Corps is, and that is America's Contingency Force. So we have the IRF and the SURF mission. So the IRF is the Immediate Response Force, and the SURF is the Contingency Response Force. So what that really means is anytime the NSC needs help, and it's larger than what's handled by the Special Operations community, we're the ones that take the call. So speed and insight and that speed to action is incredibly important in everything that we do, because we measure time in hours and minutes instead of months, weeks, days, years for what we're asked to do. We have an 18-hour sequence that we go through, and so that basically means we get the call and we start moving, the same day, and we make decisions, within that cycle. So the availability of data is incredibly important to us setting the force and getting ready to execute on what we're asked to do. So Scarlet Dragon was one of the things that Josh mentioned for those that aren't familiar with it. So it's a series of exercises that we started just over a year ago, leveraging some of the investment and the great work by others here on this panel with Project Maven and others. And that's to focus on how can we fundamentally change the way that a core manages a deep fight in a LESCO type environment. When we look at time and space, what we're going to be asked to do over the next 24 to 72, how do we leverage AI, machine-to-machine communications, to actually drive speed to insight, to improve our decision-making, to get inside of our adversary's OODA loop cycle so that we can make decisions, respond faster than they can. And so that is the entire point of the Scarlet Dragon exercise. So we've been able to successfully demonstrate this in 90-day sprints and increments, that we've been able to fundamentally build the capability, increase our connectivity to the JADC2, to not only across Army units, but across the Joint Force units, to be able to pass machine to machine, targeting and other messages to the Navy, to the Air Force for actual live fire execution that we've done on a range in Fort Bragg. And so we've been able to prove this out over these series of exercises to continuously improve the capability to drive down that speed to insight and action with each iteration. And it has revealed a significant amount of, I would say, knowledge that is incredibly necessary. So one, when you look at, so what's necessary for that to happen? Data, the availability of data. Where is the data, and how do we get it in an automated fashion into a machine so that we can start leveraging algorithms? If it's collected by someone in a green government notebook or over a phone or something else in a PowerPoint, it's dead on arrival. We need it to be, in machine readable format. The second is the people, and it's the skill set required. So you can't take, what we learned is you can't take AI and then just overlay it on your traditional process. So if you already have a process and just try to drop AI on top, it's actually not much better. So you have to start by taking a step back and look at your process end to end, and then re-engineer that process on where the humans in or on the loop need to be to actually generate the benefit and the speed to actually make it happen. So we fundamentally reworked multiple processes across the Corps headquarters, taking people, instead of being in the loop, to on the loop, and then also automating steps in the process to reduce that time and to increase that speed. And it has allowed us to achieve, what many said couldn't be done, and now we're actually able to use it in actual operations.
Matt, please.
Sure. So at Army Futures Command, we really have a different mission. Our mission is to integrate and synchronize the Army's modernization enterprise. So think research labs, basic research, next generation technologies that in the Army 2030 or Army 2040 are going to really be game changing. What makes that incredibly challenging is it is likely that we need to integrate these technologies with legacy systems as well. So in Project Convergence, what we've done is in some cases have hundreds of new technologies on a network to see if we can shorten the amount of time that you go from a given sensor to an appropriate shooter. So that's what we call the convergence. I think what we have found, one, is we have a great innovation sector, and building a component that adds value and provides almost a user story for the battlefield that makes sense and is novel, we have that in abundance. What is truly difficult in our context is integrating those things. So I think a theme we heard from earlier in the morning is where manual processes are really a bottleneck in your system. So those abound across the battlefield. The way we configure our networks, for example, that takes us quite some time in the modernization enterprise to exercise these new technologies in a way that we can replicate these threads, if you will, or these actions. Another thing we recognize is that the ability to monitor this system of technologies is extremely difficult. If you think about the way we've decomposed these problems in the past, it is often different vendors through different program offices that are turning these ideas into something that is in a soldier's hands. But where we've dramatically increased the amount of machine-to-machine communication we need to have on the battlefield to capitalize on AI and really human-machine teaming, that ability to decompose the problem that way really breaks down. So what we're finding is the level of standardization and protocol enforcement, all those processes that have been manual in the past, we're needing to instrument and scale those up if we really want to have like a battlefield of things that leverages these technologies as a system of systems.
So David, we're talking a little bit right now in regards to joint all-domain command and control, JADC2, as it relates to the Army's efforts, but all the services are underway in this effort. And as you think about the foundational pieces and your purview as the chief data officer to lay the infrastructure that these things can be institutionalized and live beyond where we are today, what are some of the major things that you think are going to be critical to that future state that you drove and that the department has continued to push?
Yeah, so I think there were some people that came before us that deserve some credit. I see General Kreider in the back of the room there. She was actually, I think, the first military department chief data officer in the DoD. She was the Air Force CDO. So we all kind of fleeted in behind her and learned a lot. As we started building this from the beginning, we knew that it was ultimately about decision advantage. It wasn't just doing data management for data management purposes. And through that decision advantage, there were going to be advanced analytic tools that we could bring to bear from what we say the battle space, which Matt and Jared just spoke about, but also the boardroom, how we run the Department of Defense. And so as we started setting policies and we started thinking about where we needed to go, what we realized was we didn't even have a data strategy. And so first and foremost, we wrote a new data strategy, a first data strategy, and we emphasized joint all-domain operations, senior leader decision support, and then business analytics as the top three focus areas that we were going to tackle. They're all three priorities, but one took precedence over the others. Because if we didn't write a data strategy that our generals, that our flag officers, that our colonels, that our senior enlisted could see themselves in, then it wouldn't really matter what we were trying to do. We'd never have that true buy-in that would guarantee the investment. And when you talk about the investment, I think the first investment I talk about when we look at the components of a data ecosystem to be able to pull off that decision advantage from the battle space to the boardroom really is the human capital, the talent. And so we spent a lot of time emphasizing building the right data community interest, ensuring that at echelon we had degrees of data fluency. So when we issued a federated data cataloging memo, everybody will catalog their data. We didn't have one of those before. That we had individuals at echelon, whether it's at the 82nd Airborne, whether it's at the MU, which by the way is the America's 911 force. So I beg to differ on which one pushes faster, but little inter-service rivalry there. We can't. We're already there. But when you look at that, you really start to think about what we need. I need Corporal Spurk to have a degree of data fluency. So when the Deputy Secretary of Defense signs out a data strategy or a JADC2 strategy, we can follow that up with the requisite data policy memos to cover that corporals. And then the corporal actually understands what a data catalog is, why it's important, and how to do something about it. So I think there's absolutely a person component to this. We talk regularly about talent before tools so that we can do the data work required and hold those data maturity models clean so that when we need to develop an exquisite capability leveraging artificial intelligence, we're in a position to do so.
Yeah, I know General Crowder's not new to data issues and data quality problems. My question is, Jared, when you think about what's going on right now with these exercises, you think about the investments we've made on what I would call the digital IQ front. Are you seeing it? Mostly what we see in the commercial side and industry and even in the government is people really don't care about all the work that goes into dealing with data until they derive value out of that work. So through these exercises, are you seeing the corporals, if you will, really start to understand the value of the data work, for lack of better words?
Yes. In a short, so the short answer is yes. Long answer is it widespread across the entire force? Not yet. Or do they at least know like some of the vernacular and can when I say data quality, like, oh yeah, so we need clean data. That is definitely rising. I think there's still an area that we have to go work that incentivizes them, that they get something back out of the process. So, a big thing that we say is, we're doing this to help your lives suck less. So we're fixing a process in the motor pool with maintenance or, in the HR system to make, something talk and actually work, to actually make, their lives better, to make their processes better. And so once you involve them in that process, and that's incredibly important for the user that is actually going to use the tool to be sitting there right next to you, iterating in real time, and then they get the output of that and start using it, light bulbs go off. And then it's excitement, and then it becomes a groundswell because then, from the 1 and the 4, that's HR and logistics, and all of a sudden, like the 3 shops, like, hey, can we automate this in the operations side? Because they start talking and that starts spreading, and then you end up start curating this backlog that we'll never realistically ever be able to get through, in our current resource constrained environment. So I think yes, and we're seeing it. And then even more exciting, recently we've been able to do a couple things. One, we had green suiters, so actually Army soldiers developed an app to support our recent and still ongoing, deployment to UCOM. We were able to develop an app and get it hosted in the TAC. So just think of like the tactical network, little Samsung phone, type thing, into the DoD app space, and to get it pushed out to the paratroopers that are deploying. We built that in 2 weeks ourselves internally, and then we're able to set up a data pipeline and a data environment in the IL4, so unclassified, AWS type environment, to actually do analytics in real time to fix the machine to machine that we talked about, to actually have the data in the right place, so then we can actually run analytics on it and all the other things. And that never would have been possible without what Dave was just talking about and the steps that have been taken in place, because they came to us being like, I think, Jared, we can do this. All right, let's try it. What do you need? And it was just, homegrown. That probably wouldn't have happened a year ago.
No, thanks for that. So my next question is for David and Matt. Both of you come from, chief data officer, chief data scientist for the special operations community, which is one that's near and dear to my heart, right? And they've never stopped. Those operations are always going. And you've had to deliver it for them, I would say, probably for a while at the pace of need, right? As you took on those roles and now then moved off into the roles you were in and are in and worked more in the Army enterprise level, how did that influence you? What did you learn? And how did that shape your points of view as you shifted to new roles? And David, I'll start with you if that's okay.
So I'll start, but before I get too far, I did just want to thank Amir. Early in the journey where SOCOM was the first combatant command with the CDO, Amir answered a call and came and spoke to our SOCOM senior most leadership, talking to us about the art of the possible. And I won't forget driving him to the airport in my old F-150. I still have it. And I started talking about the data archetypes to the talent point. And, I think we need data scientists, we need, AI developers, and I think I listed 7 different types of positions. And the last 2 I mentioned, Amir waved all the technical experts off. He said, we've got that for you. Industry heard you. We're going to deliver. The 2 key people in this formation that are going to help you find success are your tactical and senior most leaders who have the domain expertise, who when the data professionals, when the AI professionals show up ready to help you reimagine that process, have the ability to reimagine that process. And I think if I could take anything away from the SOCOM experience and say, how is this growing in the conventional force? It's because a lot of those people that we started on some of those projects really operationalizing the capability and moving it into the formation for real, into the warfighting functions, as messy as it might have been, have now been promoted and moved into new positions and senior positions that they can begin influencing that. And it's a compounding return because, to Amir, I think your point then, the more they get their hands dirty, the more they're going to understand how complicated this is, the things that they need to overcome next time, and you'll see a synergistic effect and rise throughout the entire formation from them. I think that's what we're seeing. I think about a lot of the leaders of the 18th Airborne Corps right now, from Lieutenant General Donahue to Molly Salisbury and down. I think about Matt moving from a lieutenant colonel at JSOC into his current position. I think we're really just seeing that bear out. And again, it comes into that data fluency by getting your hands dirty and actually integrating the technology, not waiting to perfect something and then bring it in a 5-year cycle.
I'll beat the same horse in a slightly different way. I think what we saw in the special operations community is that when you put your technologists next to your operational leaders and they're solving problems that matter to the organization, there's all kinds of nice byproducts that happen. So what I observed, I think in 4 years in JSOC is when we first started that adventure, all of our operational leaders kind of thought at the application layer. Like when we would describe our value proposition, it would be like, hey, the app's going to do this, right? And by the time I left, at the 3-star level, we were talking about data pipelines and platforms. So like right now, I'm on a small working group with the Army's acquisition community, trying to talk about what do we mean by software at the edge? What does development at the edge look like? And I use 3 kind of stories to frame that to them. First, we had to help Syrian Democratic Forces onboard hundreds of thousands of people in terms of demographics and biometrics downrange. Commander said, we need this, and we were able to give them a scalable solution to do that. That's now a high-value data set. Next piece, General Donahue said, I am really worried in Afghanistan about Afghan recruits and the threat that they pose to U.S. forces, because we had some incidents. So scaling up the data collection and analysis for counterintelligence vetting of recruits. And then the last one, clearance of the Middle Euphrates River Valley as we start to take down ISIS. Can we aggregate the way we look at information to better understand foreign fighter flows as they exit that region? So each one of those cases has a few interesting characteristics. One, that is a commander turning to a technologist and giving us a pretty well-framed technical problem, because they had nerds within reach for a year or two. 2, from commander saying, I need this, to workflow in production was measured in weeks, not months. And then last part, which is probably less interesting to this crowd, but I'm proud of, is none of those things are in production right now, right? So like when they stopped providing mission value, we decommissioned the app. But the exercise of doing that has matured our platform services, our shared code base as an inter-source project. So the cost of spinning up a mission unique requirement that delivers impact is relatively low. So we're now getting to a point where commanders can say, hey, I understand I need a really fantastic common operating picture, and I'm going to turn to a professional software development folks from industry to provide that. But there's always going to be a layer of the system where it's an unforeseen requirement like Jared just talked about, right? So now that mindset's getting replicated out in the general force, in how we prioritize building a platform that allows us to deliver at the edge is super important. So one of the things we're doing at Army Futures Command is we've got the Army Software Factory, right in downtown Austin. We bring in cohorts of soldiers, 25 at a time, and they partner with senior engineers from VMware. They work through like a boot camp, like 14-ish week process. And then they serve almost like an apprentice journeyman period with these senior engineers to solve real problems. So delivering value to the Army, which I think is a convenient byproduct. But the real value is we're growing talent and we're hardening a platform that makes the cost of doing that really low.
If I could double down and just, again, how we go from not just, soft to service, but then service to OSD, taking those same lessons learned from the tactical data teams that you described, taking those same capabilities of getting technologists next to the operators and learning together and building together. That's what part of the Artificial Intelligence and Data Accelerator Initiative from Deputy Secretary of Defense Hicks is. It's taking that same lesson learned and that same concept and moving it into the operational strategic realm, where we take lessons learned from NORTHCOM NORAD and General Van Herk's Global Information Dominance Experiment. It's taking the same platform that we're using, the same data layers that we're using for Scarlet and Dragon that we've used throughout the soft formation for a decade, and it's making them available and taking those same constructs and now putting data talent into the combatant commands, extending the data management platforms to them and allowing them to both unlock their future and come together as one whole. So it's a very powerful initiative to still take advantage of those campaigns of learning live in our formation so that we can begin just doing this and iterating, persistently into the future.
Yeah, I have to tell you, gentlemen, man, I was talking to a person that works for a very special unit in Fort Bragg the other day who's a customer of these tactical data exploitation teams. And I was asking him about a use case. Oh, I'm not really technical. Right. And I said, okay, but here's the deal. And then he goes on to lecture me about the problems around the APIs. Right. This is a person that clears rooms and captures bad people. So something is working. We've got 5 minutes left. I'm going to close with one that I think we have a lot of industry here today. So if you could do me a favor on this, if you were starting a company tomorrow and I gave you a blank check and you were going to go do R&D or M&A or whatever you had to do to bring forward a differentiated point of view that would be highly valuable to what you all are trying to accomplish right now, what are, each of you real quick, if you just say, where would you focus those resources and why? Do you want to start, Matt? I've no doubt you have a profound point of view.
Well, so I'll tell you a technical problem I see, in terms of value judgment. Literally every check I've ever been paid in my life has been by your tax dollars. So business viability is not my expertise. When I look at the field of observability right now in cloud computing, so your ability in a complex system to understand the health of the system just by the outputs of that system, and then be able to, once you know there's a problem, quickly understand what that is and mitigate it, right? So if I'm Amazon Web Services, I want to understand if one of my services is performing poorly before it costs me a lot of money. If instead of the way customers navigate my microservices, we think about information migrating from a given sensor to a given shooter on the battlefield, and instead of microservices, we're talking about different technologies arrayed across a complex network that's under attack, that's using different bandwidths. The complexity of the problem is high, and right now we don't have a framework that allows for us to truly understand the health of that system just based on its outputs. So a company that could be easily employed across an array of systems to help us gain that insight would be super valuable to us.
And David or Jared, anything to add there? Otherwise, I have one other quick one.
I knew this one was coming, so I was actually listening to General Neller, and I was thinking through what my thoughts on that one would be, based on some of his comments. And by the way, I was able to type them on my phone, which I couldn't do in the Pentagon. So mobility is a key as well, please. But the first is an ability to ensure your data and models are protected and will remain performant in high consequence military operations. It's kind of a different play on what you just said. There's a new concept of commander risk that has emerged as we start moving to predictive and prescriptive models and asking our commanders to trust them more than they trust the colonel to give them advice. We need to also be able to tell them accountability, as General Neller talked about, but also when we start to believe this will be performant or not based on the operational environment and the enemy with which we're engaging. So I think that's one. Two, quantum encryption and blockchain to both protect and hold the mapping of data lineage true, so that the data professionals can go in as we start mapping these and understanding where the data's been, how it's been handled, and how we can start to use some of the technologies that are emerging in the crypto market to help us, not for crypto, but rather to understand our data better and also kind of understand the custody of that data as it's been going. Production and dissemination of truth. I think that's a little bit more strategic, but in today's day and age, being able to identify misinformation in real time, automate the countering of that mistruth, and then identifying truth and supporting the propagation of it, whether it's in a tactical environment or whether it's in the strategic context, I think is important. And there's going to be an opportunity to leverage artificial intelligence to do that. And then the last, I think, is AI and AR for tailored training and education, both to create a better domain expertise, but more broadly, human performance maintenance and improvements.
Well, look, thank you, gentlemen. Really appreciate it. I'm sure there's a ton of questions from the crowd, but the good news is most of them will still be here afterwards, so please feel free to reach out to them. We really appreciate it. We also, more importantly, really appreciate the service to our country, so thank you.